Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session. I mean, we're coming to the end of these conversations with people who are successful, people who can give us advice on what it takes to make it. If not to the top, then pretty much a long way up the mountain. And as all of you guys get ready to climb your own mountain, these conversations have been invaluable. I know because you've been writing in, been dropping me LinkedIn messages, you've been dropping me emails just saying how powerful they've been as you listen to people talk about their experiences openly, just about what is made for success, what their values are, what their sense of purpose is, all that sort of stuff. So we welcome this evening another leader, great leader in our industry, Mark Versey. I've known Mark for a huge amount of time. I'm trying to think, I don't know how many years, but we go back a long, long way. And I'm just so delighted, Mark, that you're joining us this evening. Thank you very much indeed for coming to talk to us.
Pleasure. Lovely.
Yeah,
to be here.
Absolutely brilliant. And so we'll get into, Mark, we'll get into the conversation, but ladies and gentlemen, you know how these conversations go, because everyone we talk to who's made it in some way on Wall Street or in the city of London, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how there's a theme emerging. Everyone has a strong sense of values. Everyone is driven by a sense of purpose. They know where they're going. But not only that, people are organized, right? They start at the beginning of the day with a plan. They don't just drift into it. Nothing's accidental. They have a strong ability to execute and get stuff done. So they don't just talk about doing things, they actually do them. And they've all done their 10,000 hours. We've talked about this concept, haven't we? This idea that you get better and better at doing what you do until you've done 10,000 hours and you're the best in the business. There's no one who's better than you. These people also learn from failure. Failure doesn't crush them. You know, failure is hard. And when we've talked to people and said, tell us a little bit about times where you struggled and where it hasn't gone right, they'll tell you about what went wrong, but they'll also tell you that they learned something, and they learned something about themselves. They learned something about the way the world works, and they emerge from it stronger and better able to do their jobs. And these are people also who understand what makes the boats go faster. They're able to focus, they're able to understand their situation and work out where they are and what they need to do in order to do their job properly. So this is a theme, and I'm sure we're going to continue the conversation this evening with Mark Versey as he explains to us what he does, what his job is, and how he's gotten to where he has. But let me introduce Mark to you. So Mark he's CEO of Aviva Investors, and you guys know all about Aviva Investors. It's like, this is one of the preeminent institutions in the United Kingdom. Mark's CEO, he's also director of the Aviva Investors Global Services Limited board. Mark joined Aviva back in 2014. He was appointed CEO January 21. And before that, he was CIO. CIO, we all know, means Chief Investment Officer for Aviva Investors Real Assets. And that was from its formation in 2018. And huge amount of growth. Assets went from 37 billion to 47 billion, so a growth of 10 billion. That doesn't happen by accident. Mark also sits on the board of the Investment Association, and this is a body that brings together the entire investment industry. And he also then chairs its Sustainability and Responsible Investment Committee. Mark, you began, I think, as a consultant actuary. You got a mathematics degree from Cambridge. You've done a bunch of stuff. You understand derivatives, you understand risk management. I mean, all those areas of the capital markets that, well, for me as well, have been our bread and butter over the years. But you've just done a huge number of things. And let me just start by asking you a little bit about the business that you run. What does it do? I mean, it's a huge organization, but what does it do? And for you, what's your day job? Let's ask that question.
Okay, thanks, David. Yeah, so Chief Executive since 1st of January. And I think probably I should start by saying I'm still learning what that role is. And we'll get into it, I'm sure. The company is asset management. It's part of the Aviva big financial services group, which is insurance, savings, and investments. Within the asset management side, it's 1,500 people globally, although the majority are based in the UK. The focus of what we invest into is I'm pivoting it right now very much to focus on sustainable investing. And all things ESG focus. So with that climate focus, with the social focus, Our clients are insurance companies, I mean, like Aviva, obviously, but also pension funds, wealth managers, and in turn, we're managing savings for their customers, which are ultimately the main population. So yeah, my day job is now, it's a leadership role, and it's sort of the ultimate journey I've been on for the last, let's call it 10 years, is changing from being a technical expert as a chief investment officer to being a leader. And really, you know, we can get into it, I think, Gareth. It's about strategy, vision, getting others to do the work, frankly, and letting them do it and helping them, getting things out of their way, rather than doing it myself, which frankly is what I have always done. I like getting involved, and I'm still learning that that's not what this role is. It's now, you know, watching others do it and helping them do it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, no, been a great journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you've always been chief investment officer, so you've always, as you say, been very, very technical, and now you're CEO. And I guess in some ways, many people dream about becoming chief executive officer. It's the very, very top of the organization, and that doesn't happen by accident. You just sort of don't accidentally wake up and stumble into being the chief executive. I'd love to get a sense. This is always a hard question to ask, but I'd love to get a sense from you, Mark, about what you think the board was looking for when they appointed you. I mean, what skills were they looking for? What are the attributes of chief executive, would you say?
Yeah, I think I have to say, being a CEO was never an ambition for me. Probably until about 5 years ago, it was never on the radar. I think I sort of exceeded my own ambitions from sort of university level, but the way it happens and the way you develop is you do a role, and you look at your boss, or this is how it worked for me. You look at your boss, and eventually you say, do you know what, I could actually do that better than they do it. And then you suddenly start thinking, well, maybe I do want to do it. And then when the opportunity comes along, you have to decide whether you're ready for it or not. And I think that's kind of what happened here. So, you know, I've been on the succession plan for the CEO role for a few years, but I never really took that seriously until probably the last year. And then I really did start to sort of see actually the direction of travel needs to change. I started to sort of disagree with some of the way we were going and so on. And I think, you know, when the opportunity then came up and I was asked, you know, would I like to, then I was super excited about it. I was like, yes, I'd love to. And the reason is because I want to do this, and I want to do this, and this is how I would go about it. And I'd thought about that. And so, you know, when that chat came, I wasn't sort of panicking and kind of thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say? You know, I totally knew what I was going to say. And I think, you know, probably even 6 months before, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I think what they're looking for is, you know, well, my background, as David said, it is I'm an investment specialist, but I'm also being a consultant. I speak the language of banking. I speak the language of insurance. I speak the language of asset management. So I'm sort of I like to see myself as an interpreter between quite complicated areas of the world. And there aren't many people who can actually do that. So that sort of became my uniqueness. There are a few, and a lot of them have actually risen to very senior positions as well, actually. So there's something in there about how do you create that kind of uniqueness, I guess. But I think that this role is about leadership, and I've been managing a team of 300 people. Prior to that, I've had great deliveries, as you heard there, of growing a business, and I had a really strong vision of what to do next, and I guess the confidence to sort of give it a go. And I think that's why it happened. So yeah, there's probably a lot more we can get into there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I mean, over the years, and I'm guessing now it's more than a couple of decades, right? That you've been working. You've obviously done your 10,000 hours, not just in one area, but in multiple areas. So like you say, you're multilingual. So it's like someone who speaks French, Italian, German, Spanish, and Dutch. I guess you speak insurance, investment banking, pensions, capital markets. There's a whole risk management. These are all the things, of course, that matter. Yeah. And so you're able to look across all those different areas.
Yeah, and you can bring it together.
Yeah.
Because that's what the job ultimately is as a leader.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I guess you have different personality types in each of those industries, right? Your average investment banking person is different, maybe in some way, to the person who runs a pension fund, is different again to someone in insurance, right? So just like Germans are different to Italians, I guess you could say, you've got to be able to, that ability to speak the different languages is quite a subtle and a powerful thing to be able to do, and then bring it all together and have a vision as well. I mean, in terms of vision, maybe talk about vision and how important that is as a leader. What is even vision for a leader? I guess, you're in the interview and then the board says, so what's your vision? I mean, how do you start to think about vision, and what can you unpack that a little bit for these guys are the leaders of the future, by the way. So how important is it to have vision, and where does it come from, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so I think very important when you sort of start your career. You don't need to have that sort of vision for a company or something like that. I mean, fantastic if you do, because some people do. I certainly didn't, and I bought into someone else's vision, if you like, but you've got to be able to buy into it, I think, to work there. But after now having been in the business a long time, seeing a lot of different things, and I was able to articulate sort of more of a purpose. What are we actually going to focus on? And that is sustainable investing. So that's focusing on delivering the Paris ambitions of net zero 2050. It's focusing on the societal aspects of investing, and really, taking that as the whole purpose of the investors. We've actually changed our vision now to have, while building a sustainable world is at the end of our sentence to deliver exceptional investment experience while building sustainable world. So we've actually built that right in front and center for everything that we're doing in Aviva Investors now. So that sort of rallying cry, I think, is what brings people into work. It brings them in. If they don't want to follow that, then that's great too, but we're not the right company for them. But vision, I guess, is a bit more. It's being very clear about what we're good at and what we're not good at. And what I've done in the first 6 months is shut down a bunch of things that we're average at, because we just shouldn't. There are people who are better, and it doesn't tie in necessarily with the sustainable investing. So I've been, a little bit ruthless, you could say, in terms of getting things done quickly, but being focused on the financials in particular there. And then, who are we doing it for? It's for wealth, and it's for retirement solutions. So those are the key focus areas where we're doing this too. So the vision about who we're going to market to, knowing our market. And then I think the bit that I never quite realized I would need is sort of a vision about myself. What do I stand for?
Yeah.
It's separate from the business. And for me, the diversity and inclusion aspects of creating a fair company to work in for all is something really, really core to my beliefs. And that became a really cool part of it. I think that sustainable investing in ESG is another one of those sort of core things. And then the final one is to help connect the customers to the assets, to what they actually invest into. And I think people who are saving are quite excited to learn that we are, with their money, we are negotiating to get Shell to sign up to net zero targets. They're quite excited that we're building things, we're building wind farms, we're quite excited that we're lending to amazing companies who are building new innovations. But what they don't want to care about is investing to beat a FTSE 100 benchmark, and all that sort of stuff, which is the old way of you know. So that's sort of what I stand for, trying to improve all that. And I think you need to know yourself to get to this kind of role. And I certainly didn't know that kind of stuff until probably fairly recently, really.
Yeah, that's just really powerful because, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about this, haven't we? This whole area of ESG, environmental sustainability, or social and governance. And here you're seeing a leader who's saying, look, this is what the future's about. This next decade for Mark is all about kind of the institution was going in the general direction. He's basically sharpening that up and saying, if we're going to do this, we've got to do it properly, and here's how we're going to do it. And it's interesting, everything you said has been about sustainability, about responsible investment, about climate. You're clearly taking this very seriously. I mean, everyone is sort of taking it kind of seriously, but it sounds as though you are really taking it to the next level, and everything you're doing as an organization, it's not some sort of side of desk thing. This is the lens through which you're looking at everything, right?
In the betting analogy, I'm not doubling down like most people are. I'm going all in.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah. Everything we do.
Yeah, I can completely see that. I mean, within ESG, you obviously have the S it's from a social perspective.
Yep.
So E is environmental, and obviously climate is huge. Not, no getting away from that. It's massive. But then you've also got the S, which is social, which is the way we run our organizations, the kind of organizations that we create. What is your view of what a great organization looks like, where people feel like, I belong here. This is my tribe, if you like.
Yeah. So you've got to have a purpose that you buy into. And you've got to, it's got to be inclusive. You've got to be able to bring your entire self to work. I think that's, we're getting there, but we've got such a lot to learn. Aviva gets great plaudits for being a great company where you can do that. But we are so far away from declaring victory. But I hope we can one day. I mean, I think those are the two things, really. I mean, people who work hard, who you feel, you want to work with. You have to remember that when you're working, I mean, apart from this last year, it's generally been a very social experience, and you have to like being around the people you're with. So you have to like your manager as well. After a certain amount of time, you can put up with some. But I think you have to like going to work, so you need to know why you're doing it, who you're doing it with, and that you can be yourself when you get there.
Yeah, totally. And tell me a little bit about how you succeed in a firm like Aviva Investors. So we have a number of interns who are turning up. They're going to be in your shop pretty shortly. What does good look like? What are you looking for in an intern, and indeed in a long-term, successful young employee, young graduate? What are the things that mark someone out where you say, you know what, that person could go far?
Yeah, so you can't walk past the sort of technical raw smarts, because I think that you do need that, particularly in asset management. It doesn't have to come from a science, technology, economics, maths degree. It can come from anything. The diversity of thought is critical. And the whole point about the diversity programs is to have diversity of thought. It's the thought that we're really looking for. Showing early signs of leadership is useful, but not essential. But collaboration is essential. So being not too self-focused. It's not all about yourself, and that's the difference between banking, where that in some senses is encouraged. Whereas collaboration is encouraged in asset management much more so. And then for me, I've always liked people who are positive, who are full of energy, and who can communicate. I think being positive is just something that is quite something I particularly look for. Not the glass is half empty kind of person. You probably do need a few of those for a diversity of thought, but they're tough to work with.
Yeah, this is great to hear, right? Because by definition, a lot of the interns that we are pulling together and are bringing into the industry are coming from a different background. These are not the usual suspects. So what's great about what you're saying, which is your requirement for diversity of opinion, well, you're going to get that, and you're going to get, you're going to get a huge amount of that, because a lot of, a lot of these graduates will have come from a different background, completely different heritage and way of looking at the world, which, to my mind, has to be a great thing and something that our industry probably could do with.
Totally. And look, forget about fairness, which is the reason I'm here. This actually will make us do better investment decisions. The world is not driven anymore, and maybe it was once upon a time, by simple economics. I think politics and the ESG factors and all socioeconomic factors come into play so much more in everything that we're investing into. So diversity of thought actually would make us better at investments. And then separately, our customers, our clients are demanding that we have diversity of thought. So it's not even an option, even if we wanted it to be anymore, which is fantastic as well. So it's not optional.
Yeah, totally. No, I couldn't agree with you. Couldn't agree with you more. Let me just pull in a couple of questions that we're getting from the crowd. So here we go. So here's one. Mark's pivot from quite a technical position to such a strategic one, which is this is a very astute observation, is really impressive. How did you adjust your personality to fit the role of CEO? How did you adjust did you need to adjust your personality, because you were very technical and now you're very strategic, you're in a position of extreme leadership? Have you had to change who you are?
I think what I had to do, first of all, is to know myself.
Yeah.
And actually I went on a few leadership courses, and one I went on was particularly insightful because it went into all the drivers, what drives me, and some of my sort of bad parts of my personality, or bad as in they can trip me up.
To do some work.
And I think so you need to know yourself, and I think, by the way, you change over time as well, which makes it's not something you can do now. But I think once you know that, then you know what your strengths are, and you know what you want to do. And I think that's where I then started to realize, I really do like this leadership side of it, but it is completely different. But the good news is it is a skill that you can learn.
Right.
You can literally, it's like a technical skill in some ways. There are tools, techniques, there are books, there are courses, there are people who coach you, and you can actually get better and better and better at it. So I've been on a journey probably for 10 years of learning more and more about leadership, and that's how you get better at it. So, but somewhere along that journey, you actually have to accept that some of the stuff that's quoted as leadership is actually important to the business. And I could just give an example of that. I hate walking around the floor and going and talking to people because they want me to. That's what I'm told, that people want me to go and walk around the floor and be an inspirational leader, right? That drives fear into my heart. And I thought, what a waste of my time, because I'd rather be working on an investment transaction and making some money for the company or whatever. And actually what I've come to realize is actually it's really important to do what I just said, going and talking to people across the organization. But it took a coach to tell me, don't you want to know what your people are doing? It's your business, isn't it? Don't you want to know what they're up to, like for you? And so just changing it to be, it can be about me, not about people I'm going to. Just giving me that different perspective on, that's great. So now I've got a purpose. I can go out and I go, hey, what are you doing? Tell me about it. How can I help? How can I? But it's about me, and so it's not contrived anymore. And so, but that's something I've learned that, right? I didn't have that. So that's just an example.
Yeah, this is a really powerful point, because I think people look at leaders and leadership, and they sort of think, well, you know, how am I ever going to do that? How am I ever going to become a leader? You know, maybe people are shy, maybe they just feel, I find it hard enough to have a conversation one-on-one. How am I ever going to stand in front of an entire organization or lead from the front? That's just not me. I'm not a leader. I've always been someone at the back. But to hear you say that you can actually learn those skills and that it comes over time, I think is very powerful. Let me ask you still on this question of leadership, because a lot of our young people who are listening today will become, you know, they'll be, I guess, in their mid-30s in 10 years' time, something like that, or early 30s, 10 years' time. What do you think this next decade requires of our young people if they are to become leaders? Like, what sort of person do you, I know you've touched on it already, but what sort of person do you think people will need to be? And that's maybe different to the way it was when we started out 25 years ago. To be a leader then, you kind of, you know, you needed to be a bit kind of alpha about things and chest beating and all about how do I make the most money for the company and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure that's necessarily what the leader of the future looks like.
I agree. I think so. I think leadership's changing, or probably it's always needed. What I'm about to say, but people were able to get into leadership positions who didn't have those skills, and they were just simply good at making money. I mean, both David and I have worked in investment banking, and it, you know, the only time anyone would ever say thank you to you when I was in investment banking was when you'd done a massive trade and you'd made probably more than $1 million for the bank on a trade. That was when you got the big thank you. And whereas, you know, what I've learned when you're in the real world is you need to listen to your team. You need to say thank you. You need to, you know, you watch your team and you help them, you encourage them. You don't take over. You don't try and do it all yourself. And you've got to be good at communicating, that's for sure. You've got to have clarity of purpose and clarity of messaging. You know, you've got to say the same thing 7 times apparently before people take it in. So, you know, keep repeating stuff again and again and again. But people ultimately are looking for consistency, because then they can trust you. The trust, as they say, trust can't be earned. Sorry, trust has to be earned. You can't just get trust. You have to earn it, and you earn it by being consistent and by being fair. So yeah, it's I think, you know, the leaders are people managers who care about the people. It's nurturing. It's all about the people rather than the product of the company in some ways. Yeah. It's funny
you make the point about saying the same thing over and over and then eventually it lands, because we've been doing that, haven't we, ladies and gentlemen? We've been talking about 10,000 hours. We've been talking about the fact that you don't just wake up an expert. You know, I've been interviewing now, I don't know how many people I've interviewed, but let's say something like 20, and everybody is a leader in their field. And it doesn't just happen. It's kind of, there's a temptation to think, well, you know, how am I ever going to get there? But it's about doing it's about doing the job as well as you can and just continually doing it. I think it's what Jeff Bezos calls gradatim ferociter, which is Latin, which just means step by step, ferociously. You just keep going step by step. And sometimes you get knocked down, but you get up and you don't let it crush you. You just get up and you learn and you think, what did I do that time? I could have done a bit better. Okay, let me do that next time. And you just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
I think that learning point is critical. You know, one thing I've done all the way through my career is carry on learning new things.
Yeah.
Trying to grow, trying to stay quite flexible and stay modern. And by learning stuff, you actually become skillful. And if you're learning something that's not going anywhere, then you can change. You can learn new things. And I think that's just how it works. So just keep doors open. That would be another big message I would give. You know, don't get too blinkered on going in a certain direction. And in fact, I don't think many people anymore will ever start in one place and will just carry on up a ladder.
Yeah,
So when I joined consultancy, there was sort of this route to get to a partner, and that was what everyone aspired to. And hardly anyone that I started with ever did that. They all left and went different ways, and they're the ones who've actually ended up in the bigger jobs in the long run.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. My own career has been a very serpentine and windy road. I started life as a junior lawyer, and then I became an in-house lawyer, and then I became an investment banker, and then I became an investment consultant, and I became an entrepreneur. I mean, I've been all like you. I mean, it's been a long and windy road, my friend.
Yeah.
Let me just bring another question. Let's see what we've got here. So, as a future intern in Aviva Investors this summer, I'm curious to find out a little bit more about the real assets and credit investment business split in Aviva Investors. I mean, Mark, you're obviously CIO of Real Assets. Can you maybe just describe a little bit about what that business does and what the credit side does?
Sure. Yeah. So Real Assets is where fundamentally we are building offices or we're building infrastructure projects like wind farms, or we are lending to people who are building offices or who own offices or infrastructure projects. So the credit side is the lending to those projects, and the equity side is where we actually are the owner. I'm going through a big period of change right now because with the focus now on reducing the carbon footprint of all of our assets, a lot of the talk you hear from asset managers is about how they talk to corporates like Shell, BP, and try and get them to change. Whereas in Real Assets, we are the owners of the corporates, because the corporates are effectively an office that you own, or it might be a bunch of trains that you own that you need to electrify. And it's up to us to bring down the carbon footprint of those buildings ourselves. So we have to try and convert the energy sources to be renewable. We have to try and make them more energy efficient. We have to change the tenants who are in there, et cetera, et cetera. So, Real Assets is an area of the business I completely fell in love with, because you can see it, you can touch it, great pictures, customers love it, and you can actually get great returns still as well. So, Real Assets is a core part of my life now.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, what I'd love to do now, Mark, if I may, is just touch on the business of learning from, I'm going to call it failure, but it's not really failure if you treat it the right way. So I'd just like to know a bit about maybe one or two things that didn't go right, a time in your life or in your career where it just didn't happen for you, or something just blew up in your face, but you learned from it and you picked yourself up and you moved forward. Is there anything you can share with us that maybe shines a light on how you deal with things when they don't go right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. A couple of ideas. So when I first went into banking, I come from a consulting background, and consulting, you do a lot of work. You create a big PowerPoint to go and explain to your client. You give them your advice, and what they wanted to do is create a new retail product that they could sell. That was what my client wanted. I prepared 2 weeks' work, prepared a big deck, went to told them effectively that it doesn't work. And I'm in investment banking. I'm trying to sell some assets, some derivatives in this case. I'm trying to sell them some assets, but effectively I concluded that really it doesn't really work. And my boss, as we walked back from it, said, "Okay, right, I'm going to teach you now the difference between consulting and sales. So consulting, brilliant, fantastic. Sales, you just failed completely and utterly. You've got no sale as a result of what you've just done, and therefore, so far, you have zero bonus. And then you will have zero bonus if this carries on like this." And he said, he was smiling. He was a good manager. There are some horrible ones out there. But what he did say is that the good news is you've got a client now for life, because you've just earned the trust of this client. So while Deutsche Bank, it was at the time, Deutsche Bank aren't going to pay you for what happened today, that client may well make you quite a lot of money in the future. And so there's sort of silver lining. So Mark Versey's franchise has grown, but your current franchise in Deutsche Bank hasn't grown at all. So that's sort of a great sort of learning curve on the difference between sales and consulting. That's pretty tough, but in some ways quite fun to look back on. I think a much harder one was I did a massive project while I was in insurance companies, chief investment officer, and all off the side of my desk, all sort of late nights and so on, and with a big conclusion to fire all the managers we had, appoint a new manager for running the money, and it was going to make some savings. And I basically did too much on my own, and we went to the we went to the board, and it basically got ripped to pieces. I mean, absolutely ripped to pieces. I mean, everyone could see I'd done loads of work, but it was just not thought through. It didn't have the buy-in from management and so on. So that was a really hard knock, because that one actually set me back a little bit. You know, my status sort of was affected negatively as a result of that, even though I'd done it all discretionary on top of my day job. So the lesson learned there is very much to make sure your stakeholders who ultimately need to sign off on things, that they're all involved from early on. You make sure you know exactly what you're trying to achieve, that everyone's on board. And both of those lessons in some ways are save yourself a lot of time down the road by sorting stuff out earlier on. Get the important stuff nailed really early on, and then it saves you, wasting loads of time in the future.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That's a really, really good example. There's so many lessons in there. The first one about trust by being honest, even though it actually hurts you financially, personally, is a really powerful one. When I started work at NatWest Capital Markets, so we're going back 30 years now, in fact, almost exactly 30 years, the whole business was about selling, as you say, and it was all about trying to explain to the customer why this was the greatest deal. And sometimes a customer would ring up and want to do a transaction, and if they did, we'd just say, well, this is great, and we'd do the deal because they wanted to do it, and they just called up. There was one guy called Chris Webster, and Chris Webster was from Leeds. I don't know why I'm saying that, but he was from Leeds, and he had a strong Leeds accent, and he would just tell the customer like it was, just straight down the line. And so you'd often hear Chris going, that's a terrible idea, you shouldn't do that deal. Now's not the time to do it. We'd all be sitting there saying, Chris, that's not how it works. You kind of, the guy wants to do the deal. Why are you telling him not to do it? And Webster would just go, because it's not a good deal for him to do. Anyway, long story short, this guy, he had the strongest client relationships, because everyone knew that Chris Webster would just tell it to you straight. He never varnished it. He never pretended it wasn't what it was, something else. He would just tell you straight. Yeah. And so I couldn't agree with you more. That trust is huge. Yeah. Totally.
Not everyone does it, that's for sure.
No, it's hard to do, especially when you've got your bosses on high saying, what are you doing? I mean, that's not what we do, right? But Chris Webster, I call it the Chris Webster principle, because I see very few people do it, but it's incredibly powerful just to be authentic and just to tell the truth. It's about just telling telling the truth. And
it does pay back in the end. Yeah, you're right.
It does pay back. It does absolutely pay back. Be the authentic you. And then the other point that you're making about spending a huge amount of time building, building a castle that then someone gets kicked apart. I mean, I've totally been there. I've done that. My mistake was to spend all my time. It wasn't even a side of desk. I mean, I remember spending 6 months on some very complicated tax trade, and that I wanted to get done. And I needed the permission of one of the most senior guys in the bank. And I hadn't worked out that he fundamentally didn't like tax trades, at least the kind of tax trade I was putting together. I didn't know that. And I hadn't done my homework properly. I spent 6 months on this thing. And then at the end of it, he just said, no, you cannot do it. And the whole thing, I could have saved myself 6 months just by doing some basic homework. So I guess you're right. Be smart, right? Do the homework, figure out whether you're doing the right thing. And how do you do that? You ask people, am I doing the right thing here? Is this a smart thing to do?
Yeah. Ask, get permission, well, if you need it, but you don't necessarily need it, just make sure everyone knows what you're up to. Yeah. And then, people will help.
Yeah, of course they will. Exactly.
Some people are good at asking for help. Some people aren't. I guess I'm probably not very good at asking for help, but that's why I learned these lessons, so that you know when to.
Yeah, no, totally. And Mark, let me ask you this question, because this program, as you know, is all about the business of race equality and racial equity, and trying to redress the balance. For whatever the reasons are, we don't have enough people of Black heritage in our industry, right? It's a handful. It's just not enough. And in the portfolio management space, I think, you know, still the numbers are just shockingly low, 13 or 14 out of something like 3,000. So I'd love to just get your perspective on why you care about this issue. Obviously, you're backing it. You're here. You're talking to our interns. You're taking interns. I've spoken to you personally, and I know you care about this issue. What is it, you know, if you were just to give your perspective on why you care and what your perspective might be, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, take you back to that leadership course I went on 10 years ago. The strongest value that I have as a person is fairness. If I don't think something's fair, then I react very badly to it. And that helps me to understand, you know, a lot about my own drivers. I've also got a mischievous, I'm a bit mischievous as well. So actually my reaction, for instance, fair can be mischievous. That can get me into trouble, by the way. But I think the answer to your question, this one is that's what's in it for me is just simply the right thing to do. And then what I have witnessed immensely is that diversity of thought. I really have seen it in action, and I really do think the world is changing and wanting a very different way of working and thinking. Our clients, as I said, they're totally demanding it. It's not even optional if I wanted it to be. But for me to have it as one of my sort of pedestals I'm standing on, it's really about the fairness, and it makes us better in our day job.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. And again, thank you so much. Just on behalf of everyone, I know I can't thank you enough for being involved and for putting your hand up and saying, yeah, I'm going to get involved in this as well. It just means a huge amount. I know everyone watching this thinks that. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you. I just want to ask you, maybe finally, in terms of getting ready for this coming decade and to be the best interns and the best employees, the best graduates they can be, what would you advise, just in terms of reading and, you know, areas to study, focus? If they have any spare time, where should they be directing their efforts? What should they be reading? What should they be watching? What should they be listening to? That sort of thing. Yeah,
I think, I mean, certainly don't be too worried about what area of asset management you go into. It's definitely better to be in and move, because you learn on the job. 90% of your learning is always on the job. It's not by reading and by going to courses and things. So the place you'll learn the best is by, you know, doing an internship, for example, which is why they're so important, right? And it's the same in every company. But you do need to know about what goes on in the industry. So I think kind of stay close to stuff that's going on from the investment association. That's a good source of information. I think right now, environmental social governance issues are critical. That is the area that is in the hottest demand today, and it's going to carry on. And you know, my head of sustainability, you know, I jested the other day that we will all be working for that person at some point, and we will, by the way, we absolutely will. So ESG key right now, but it's going to be essential for a very long time. So I think anything you can learn down that road is pretty good. There's probably one other thing that I think anyone coming into the industry needs to think is kind of just realizing that people like me who are old and so on don't think like the youth of today, you know, the millennials and so on. We're trying to learn, and you know, I've got some great programs, reverse mentoring, where I get time with people who've just come into the business to try. So, but don't assume that we do get what actually people coming in want. And so speak up, don't be shy, and help us, educate us, frankly. I think that's don't assume that we will do everything right, because we don't know how to, frankly. Yeah. So, speak up.
Yeah, well, look, Mark, I just want to say thank you again. And just what you were saying there at the end is an example of your humility. And although you're chief executive, you're actually saying to people coming in, just help us to learn, help us to be better at what we do. That, to me, is the mark of a great chief executive in today, right? I mean, it shows humility and a willingness to learn, a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. Someone who doesn't feel like they already know everything, but someone who's saying, look, I need to learn. There are areas that I don't know. Even though, I mean, you're hugely technical. You speak like 5 different languages around finance, and yet you're still saying, I don't know everything. In fact, there's a lot I don't know. So help me to grow. So I just want to thank you. Our time has gone. I know everyone listening has really enjoyed and appreciated your time. I know you're very busy, so I want to just say again, thank you so much, and good luck with everything. I love the fact that you are so focused on all things environmental, social, and governance. This is exactly what we need at the top of our biggest firms. So thank you again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you all again soon. So thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you all.
Great. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.